In this video article, we're going to look at 5 questions that you should answer or do pre-writing with before you write a short story. Now, before we get started, if you want to get an email with a timestamped overview every time I release a new video like this, head over to my website at deliberate-practice.com, sign up for my email list. There's other content at that website, plus in the weeks and months to come, I'm going to add some thank you goodies and some email subscriber only content as thank you for signing up. So, question 1 that you need to answer: who is the story about? And what you should do is create a specific protagonist, not a general everyman character. So you start thinking about specific details. What age is the character? What is their occupation? A little character sketch of their background. Get to know your character. Even if some of those details don't crop up in the story, if you know your character and they're a three-dimensional character to you, that will come across in the writing for the reader. And talking of the readers, give them a reason to be emotionally invested in this character. Even if the character is some kind of sleazeball or not a particularly nice person, readers don't want to read about characters who aren't particularly nice doing something sleazy and horrible. So don't give them stories like that. You can have a character who isn't particularly nice, but they can get involved in doing something where the reader will go, oh, that is an interesting thing for this character to be doing. I wonder if he'll gain some kind of redemption from doing it. So think about things like that so that the reader can be emotionally invested in the character and then the story. And avoid stereotypes. If you're going to write any kind of mystery kind of thing, avoid the kind of 30s, 40s pulp fiction, lone detective, like the Mickey Spillane kind of characters. If you find you've got a character who is veering towards being a stereotype, do something that makes that character not a stereotype to him. So let's say you could have Mickey Spillane type character. Let's say you've got a private investigator, you're in that kind of mystery story, but maybe for some reason this guy hates physical violence, so he can't ever get into physical confrontations, which would be totally contrary to that kind of stereotype from those kind of pulp fiction private investigator stories. And also, if you do that, if you take a stereotypical character and flip him on his head, it will be something that's new to the audience. Second question: why are they doing what they are doing? You need to ensure the motives match the risk that the character in the story is taking or is going to take. If in the story they're just looking for a lost £50, they're not going to race into a burning building to try and find it. You've got to make things consistent and believable. Avoid characters acting because the story needs it. What you need to have is characters acting because it's in their own interests. So don't just, and this is a beginner writer problem, you come up with a story idea and characters do things because the plot demands that they do it. So try and think of how the characters would act and be consistent, and you'll find characters surprise you, the writer. And if that happens, it will surprise the reader as well. Any actions the characters take must align with established character traits. So I talked in the previous slide about the cowardly detective who doesn't like physical violence. So if he suddenly starts hitting suspects or trying to get information out of people by hitting them or whatever, that won't line up with the character traits that you've established. So if they do go against them, you've got to give a strong reason why. Third question: what is the story about? Have an idea of what the subject and theme are, and the subject is the content and the theme is the underlying meaning. So if you've got I talked about a story on question 1 about a sleazeball who does something that he's unlikely to do. Let's say it was some kind of petty criminal or petty drug dealer, someone low in the hierarchy of the drug dealing trade, and a woman has lost her child and he helps her. The helping of the woman is the content of the story, and then however you spin that particular story, whether he gets redemption from doing it or whether he falls back into going and selling more drugs or doing whatever he was, that can give the meaning of the story. That can be the underlying theme. And it never has to, these things, especially in short stories, don't have to be painted in bold colours. They can be very subtle and very much in the background. But it's good if you've got an idea of that and thinking about that before you get started writing. You can identify the basic situation in the story. What conflict or story question is going to drive the narrative? That is a good place or a good idea to have, because it will help move your story forward. And what feelings are you trying to invoke in the reader? Do you want them to be satisfied with the ending? Do you want them to be sad, happy? Do you want them to think, oh, yeah, okay, that was kind of cool, and that character was really clever how he solved this problem? Be aware before you start of what feelings you're actually trying to evoke. Question 4, where does the story take place? Create specific, vivid locations. So don't have general, cookie cutter, boring locations. Make them interesting, make them slightly different, have them in your head, think of some ideas for them. Even if you don't use those ideas in the story, it will still create a richer world for your story to take place in. You can treat setting as a character too, and let the setting select and influence what your characters do and how they behave. That's quite an interesting thing. I also think something that I've never seen talked about very often is that setting and description can be used in a way to communicate to the audience what your character's feeling. So the line I use to try and describe what I'm trying to say is, if you have a description of a place or a thing isn't what the thing looks like or the place looks like, it's what the character thinks it looks like. And what I mean by that is, so if you take two totally diverse examples, if you had a character who's suffering from, let's say, great grief, and he's walking past a child's playground, he probably isn't going to see, or she, if it's a woman, isn't going to see the children playing happily and react positively to that, because he's lost someone or something and he's in a bad place, and that emotion that he's feeling will influence how he views that setting. And conversely, if you had, let's say, a child's going to his best friend's birthday party and he's going past a graveyard and he's skipping past it and flowers are in bloom, trees are in bloom, all that kind of stuff, the setting of the graveyard, which could be taken as you could use in a story as a piece of foreshadowing for something bad going to be happening, but in this instance, what the character, the child, is seeing and experiencing is the trees in bloom, the sun in the trees and stuff. And it doesn't matter that it's a graveyard. It doesn't make the connection between what actually the function of a graveyard is and that it's actually at heart quite a sad place, because his emotions aren't seeing that. So that's what I'm trying to get over with that. But do use setting economically in all stories, especially short stories, and you've got to try and master the skill, and this is something you can practice, of compressing or using very short, sharp, vivid images or little metaphorical lines that need to carry a lot of weight in your story. You don't have space in most short stories to write, as they used to do in kind of Victorian age, a page and a half of description of a feast or anything like that. So you do need to get used to using setting economically. And one way you can do that is by having the setting be built into the character's actions. So if the character is walking into a hotel, the smells of the hotel, the sound of his feet as he walks down the corridor, all those things can help give the backdrop, especially if it's an important backdrop to the story, some characteristics and make it more like a character because of the protagonist or whatever character you're following at that point in the story, because of their interactions with the setting. So yes, so ensure the setting is integrated to the story. So don't ever pause for a paragraph to give a description of the setting. All that description must be integrated into what's going on, the action that's happening, that kind of thing. Fifth and final question to ask: when does the story take place? And be specific about the area and the era. And the reason why this is important is if it's a period piece set in the past, you're going to need to ensure that some of your details are accurate. You might have to do some research. And if it's a future fiction, science fiction, some kind of fantasy, and by that I don't mean sword and sorcery fantasy or epic fantasy, it could be horror, or it could be kind of like dark urban fantasy set in a future time period. You need to just spend a bit of time considering technological and social evolution. So, for example, if you were setting a story 10 years from now, you'd have to think, one of the things you might have to think about is, where is AI and automation going to take society? How is that going to change jobs? There's a great series of short stories that I'm sure you can find that I remember reading when I was younger, and they were written in, I'm going to say, the 80s, and there was a collection by Larry Niven. And what the stories, that they were all sorts of different stories, but they were all set in a society where basically teleportation devices had been invented. And obviously Larry Niven had spent some time going, well, how will this invention affect society? And a lot of the stories had these really cool details that didn't really affect the story much, but made total sense and made the world seem really real. Like, for example, the two details that I remember from these stories quite vividly. One is that there was one story about a character, and on New Year's Eve, a lot of people spent New Year's Eve using the teleportation machine to basically teleport to the next time zone where New Year was just about to break. So they would get 5 or 6 New Years in the same night because they could move across continents. And then the second one was how the police evolved a mechanism so that when there was social unrest and people were teleporting in and there were like flash mobs and there were riots and stuff like that, what they would do is, when this happened and then when the local police got there and people started teleporting away, the machines would all be rerouted to a stadium-like environment where they were basically contained, and then they could be processed by the police. Just little things like that that were really interesting and cool and made the stories really bring the world alive. So if you're doing any kind of future fiction, don't just set it in the future and have spaceships and all that kind of thing. It can be set on Earth, but look at the social evolution and think how technology might affect that. So obviously for us in the near future, we're going to be talking about AI and automation and robots and stuff. So you could come up with stories like that if you were doing a future one. So asking these 5 questions works for discovery writers. And I know I'm not a discovery writer, I've said before, but but I've tried discovery writing, and I know discovery writers often start with a character and a situation and go forwards. But even if that's the case, if you know a little bit more, I think it might make the process a little easier. But maybe you'd have to use some of these questions at first revision stage, and answering. But if you do answer just a few of them, it should give you a sense of the story, so you've got more of a direction when you start. A couple of my students in the Writing Vault have said to me they've tried discovery writing and they like it, but they've got quite a number of stories which are basically just not finished. And I saw a video on that, which I'll do as a separate video another time, on how perhaps you can deal with that. This obviously is going to work well for outliners. Outliners can start with these questions, then decide what story type they're going to use. If you look on my channel, you'll find 5 of Damon Knight's 6 story types detailed in a video, and there's an overview video that covers all 6. So if you're interested in finding out those, you'll find them on my channel. And once you've decided on what story type you're doing, then you can use a story structure, e.g. 5-Point Hero's Journey, or Dan Wells' 7-point structure, or Brandon's outline from the end and right forwards. If you're interested in any of those, again, I've got articles on all of those on my website. So you start with the questions, then do the story type, then find a story structure, then you should be in a point where you can start writing the story. Whatever happens, whether you're an outliner or whether you're a discovery writer, whether you combine both in some kind of hybrid that's not weird for you, that's unique for you, that's the word I was looking for, just you can use these questions and make them work with your process. So, closing out, there's more detailed articles on all of the topics mentioned on my YouTube channel, or all of those videos with timestamp notes and some articles on some of these items that we've mentioned, like the 5-Point Hero's Journey, Dan Wells, Damon Knight stories types. They can all be found as part of the Writing Vault. This is a resource I'm putting together for aspiring and or frustrated fiction writers. As well as all that, at the moment, I'm adding little writing prompts. If you saw my video on scales and arpeggios for fiction writers, I'm adding 1 or 2 of those a day. And I've also started creating my thoughts on deliberate practice for fiction writers and how that will work. Plus, that will include some interactive AI generated apps that you can use as practice tools, all in there. If that sounds like it might be of interest, check that URL out. There'll be a link in the description. Usually now I put it at the very top of the description, so you can go and find that. If you've got questions on that or on any of the content covered in this video, then just drop me an email to paul@deliberate-practice.com and I will get back to you as soon as you can. Thank you for your time watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next article.